What do most people think of when they hear the word community? Some sunny landscape of the mind? A small place tucked away in a territory intimately and lovingly remembered? Perhaps the community of one's youth, where everyone knew each other and helped one another. A place that evoked security, permanence, and meaning in their lives. A community in whose geographic embrace people were born, grew up, married, raised children, died, and were buried. In nostalgia's golden light, it was a little Eden. Many of those tight little territorial communities and the mythic qualities we attach to them have all but faded. Still, some exist. Does the reality match the remembrance? This is such a community. In global terms, it is a hamlet about 30 degrees north latitude, 47 degrees west longitude, in the United States of America, state of Texas, county of Lee. In local terms, it is an all-encompassing world whose sons and daughters proudly call Giddings.
Historically, if you go back far enough, in American history, communities provided all of our needs. Communities were self-sufficient. The food that you ate was grown locally. The clothes that you wore were made in your own home. So everything that one needed was in the community. More recently, as we've become interdependent from the Industrial Revolution on, the community provides really only psychological needs. They provide a sense of belonging, a place where people care about you as a whole person. The German term that we use for that sometimes is Gemeinschaft. Gemeinschaft means a social environment where relationships are emotional rather than logical, where relationships are holistic rather than segmental, where they're enduring rather than transitory. Communities provide Gemeinschaft.
Giddings is a wonderful place to live, especially if you want to raise your children in. And I want to stay the rest of my life here because it's home, and it'll always be home. You get very attached to the people. You really do know everybody. And you like the idea of going down the street and somebody waving at you. Everybody knows everybody. The worst part about that is everybody also knows everything you're doing. But the good part is that if something really bad happens, you always have somebody there to help you. Yeah. That's the best part about living in Giddings.
It doesn't matter. We have children that are injured either in car wrecks or one thing or other. There's always a benefit to support the family. We have a community, I guess, in Lexington, which is about 20 miles, still in Lee County. Had a child was injured in a football game. I think they raised around $30,000 to help this family support their medical needs. You know, it doesn't ever end. I mean, there's always something going on to improve, either for the older people or the younger people or just wherever.
I feel that Giddings is an extended family. It's your neighbors, your friends. They laugh with you when you're happy. They cry with you when you're sad. It's a place where people still take the time to stop and say, hey, we're sorry this happened. They take the time to go to somebody's funeral and let the family know that they're also going to miss the individual. And it's just, we truly do have a family atmosphere in our little town.
I like the small churches. Everybody knows everybody in the church. I think that's nice about the small community. And the schools, I think we have good schools here. And everybody knows the teachers.
Well, I think when everyone knows you, you get, if you have problems, they know you have problems, and they're concerned for you. And it gives you quite a lift sometimes when you know other people are concerned for you. I think anyone here that needs help at any time, our community would be right there to help them. And that's good.
And if we know of anyone that's sick, we try to help them out, you know, take them some food or things like that, and remember them in our prayers. That always helps a whole lot.
But Giddings does not intend to be a community simply dozing under the Texas sun, lost to urbanization. The people are trying to keep it economically viable.
Definitely, people do have pride in Giddings and in their county, in Lee County. You can see it by just going around town and seeing the cleanliness of the town. It's a lovely little town. People have volunteered to help with the rodeo arena. All of the help that we've had in getting our hospital to stay here in Giddings.
But I think Giddings, by and large, is, oh, they're community-minded. I do think that we identify with each other's needs, each other's well-being, and I suppose if one hurts, we all hurt. The people in this community banded together just recently and voted in this hospital district to support the medical needs of this community, and by and large, the community supported this effort. And we've had our economic slumps here, and but there again, we have met the challenge. The businessmen of the community got together, and about, how long ago was it on the state school? That's been about 15 years. Yeah. And we had an opportunity to attract a state reform school, and we got together and put up the money, and through people's efforts, we were able to attract a school, which meant a payroll here and jobs, and that's just one of the illustrations of what we can do as a community.
The advantage of a place like Giddings is that you belong there, that you fit in there, that you are a whole person there. If I go into a restaurant in Giddings, and I live in Giddings, I don't just go in there for the food. I go in there because I know the people know me, and I'm not just a customer. I'm not just someone to spend money. If I go into the beauty shop in Giddings, they'll ask about how's the wife doing, how is the husband doing, how are the kids doing, and they really want to know. You're treated as a whole person. You have a feeling of belonging. Another advantage would be security. I mean, the crime rate's going to be very low in Giddings because everybody knows one another, they're checking up on one another, deviant behavior is not tolerated in a small town, strangers are watched very closely, very suspiciously, so security would be an advantage also. The disadvantages are really the flip side of the coin. A lot of people wouldn't like to live in Giddings. A lot of people would find it boring or stifling. If people know you, and people care about you, that means that they want to know where you went last night, and who you went with, and how late you stayed out, and if you stayed out all night. Now, if you're the kind of person that thinks that's nobody's business but my own, then you probably don't want to live in Giddings. Territorial communities are on the decline. They're not as common as they once were. I grew up in a small town, but now that town is a suburb of Houston, and it no longer has the Gemeinschaft lifestyle. You have to move out into the middle of nowhere almost. Your segment on Giddings would be an illustration of that. In those small, isolated towns, people still know and care about one another. You still have those psychological relationships. The other place you find community today is in big metropolitan areas, in ethnic neighborhoods, the south side of Chicago, Harlem in New York, Chinatown in San Francisco, the barrios in Los Angeles. You'll still find where people know one another and care about one another. They would qualify as communities.
Are the problems of the city due to its impersonality and a lack of caring of people for each other?
Well, one of the ways we tend to try to understand our problems is that they're the result of individuals not caring enough, not wanting to be personal enough, and so forth. It seems to me from a sociological angle that it's not a very satisfactory explanation. For one thing, there's no reason to believe that people in modern American cities are any less caring or any less socially connected with one another. Whatever research we have suggests that people in modern cities have just as many friends and are just as concerned as people have ever been. Furthermore, it's not clear that these problems are a result of a lack of caring. If you imagine that the villages of some earlier time were places where people cared about one another a lot, they were places of poverty. They were also places with a lot of social problems. I think sociologists would not want to explain social problems in terms of individuals caring or not, but rather in terms of the structure of the society. Sociologists have been somewhat ambivalent as to whether there's been a loss of community in the United States. And the way I would put it is this. There is no doubt that American culture is very individualistic. And we have very often been searching for community. Our Puritan fathers were searching for community all over the place because we live in a very individualistic society. But I would distinguish that from saying that there has been a loss of community. That implies that a century ago or 2 centuries ago, we had more of this community, and we no longer do. Now, in many ways, you can think about, there's no sign that we've lost community. Take one concrete example, residential turnover. People say all the time, well, now in our society, people are moving all the time, and you can't make social connections because there's so much transiency. The irony is, and historians have demonstrated this, that people today move less often than they did a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations ago. So here is an example of how a lot of our images of the past are wrong. We are actually a more stable society. So the way I would answer that is, from international comparison, America is, yes, a very individualistic society. We don't have many of the structures of community that other cultures have. But have we lost it? I'm not sure we ever had it.
It may be that our society was less stable than we imagined, but still there were, and still are, places that provide that strong sense of territorial community. In fact, even now when people settle near a city, they often try to reproduce the stability and security of a small community.
I feel very attached to the community of DeSoto. It's a small community. They're very kind, gentle people here. Very close to some of my neighbors. I work quite a bit doing different activities for the school that my girls attend. They're in elementary school, and I'm on the PTA board and do a number of other activities at the school as such. My husband and I do attend church here in DeSoto also. That adds to our sense of closeness and attachment to the community. We go to the parks and do a number of other family activities in and around the city. So we do feel very attached to DeSoto.
Well, it's quite clear that when the American suburb was being developed, it was sold and bought by the American public as a way to combine city and country. The idea was that you could have a large estate, you could have the fresh air, you could have something that simulated the American ideal small town and yet be within close range of the city. And people who marketed the suburbs quite blatantly sold it that way and said that the dad could be at his work very quickly and yet your kids could be living in the countryside. And so Americans have tried to make that suburb the same thing as putting a farm, you might say, in the middle of the city.
I feel strongly about making a contribution to DeSoto because when we contribute to making a town great, as we feel DeSoto is, then you're more comfortable and more inclined to want to stay here and build on that. We would like to stay here and watch our children grow up. So we do feel very strongly about making a contribution to the city. Council Delegate Hillary. I was just going to mention that the last council meeting was last week on Thursday. We were introduced to our new superintendent, who is Dr. Moore. We do feel like we've put down roots here in DeSoto. We have become very active in community activities and school activities too. We would like to, as I mentioned, stay here and watch our children grow up and stay here even after that because we feel it's a wonderful place to live. Most residents of DeSoto, including myself, have a lot of pride in our city. We try to do everything that we can to make it a better city. In our neighborhood, we do have a very active neighborhood association that meets monthly. We also have a neighborhood watch that has been very productive in deterring crime here. At Christmas, we all decorate on a central theme and have quite a bit of traffic coming through here just as a sense of being proud of DeSoto. We are very proud of the community, and as such, we do quite a bit to see that our city grows. It's very difficult for me to imagine myself living somewhere other than DeSoto right now. We have had such we've had some very good times living here. The formative years for my children's growth have been here. So I have very fond memories of DeSoto. We are looking at a situation now where there's a possibility that my husband might be transferred and we might have to leave, and I'm very apprehensive about that. And actually, I'm very sad, so I hope that doesn't come to be. We do love being here. We like the atmosphere here, and we do hope that we'll be able to stay here.
Suburbs are, compared to center cities, somewhat more territorial. There seems to be somewhat more local involvement in the suburbs than there are in the cities, though a lot less than in the small town. One of the ironies is that in the last 2 generations or so, that aspect of suburbs has probably shrunk. One major reason, I think, is the fact that more and more women are working. Now, in the Ozzie and Harriet days of the 50s, you could assume that in a suburban community, the housewives would be home, the little kids would be home, and you'd have a lot of local things going on. In a modern American suburb, it's much more common for everybody to be out of the house during the day. So that territorial aspect to it has probably been diminishing over the last 20 or 30 years. It's been true for generations in the United States that Americans have solved a lot of their community problems by leaving and going to some other community. And we have in our metropolitan areas developed a lot of these separate enclaves of homogeneous populations, or at least more homogeneous than in the city, of people who can live with people like themselves and separate themselves from the wider problems of the society. And in the United States in particular, this is combined with political separation, where you can have your own police, your own city hall, your own school systems. And so we have to a great extent in the United States, these metropolitan communities which are fragmented into small enclaves. Now, we pay a price for that. It means that the people who have the finances, the skills, the talent to perhaps work together to solve a general metropolitan problem are able to separate their wallets and their energies and their interests and their concerns off in their own little separate homogeneous enclaves. We have developed a situation in the American metropolitan areas where there are separated enclaves, especially the well-to-do, who have been able to wall themselves off from the rest of the community.
Even in great cities with their vast and varied populations, people group themselves into territorial communities. Often they take the form of ethnic neighborhoods. In most large American cities, there may be as many as 50 such communities. There are also non-territorial communities. In these, people do not group themselves into one geographic area. The individual members may live miles from each other, but they still form a community based on a shared interest of profession.
Non-territorial communities, feelings of belonging, Gemeinschaft that exist without a place, have developed, in a sense, to provide exactly the same functions that the territorial communities provided. A sense of belonging, a place where people know you, and a place where people care about you. Well, let's look first at what some of these non-territorial communities might be. Probably the most common is your workplace. You get to know your workers. You know them, you like them as friends, not just as people who do a job, and they get to know you as a whole person. You discuss a lot of things at work besides just your job.
Yes, Patricia. Back, Merle, that's right. Don't go any lower.
It might be an aerobics group that you meet with and work out with. It might be the church that you belong to, the Rotary Club, on and on and on. Cities are full of non-territorial communities.
The sense of community that you get when you're working with a professional organization is really based on your common goals and your common problems too. We all fight the same battles, so to speak, as well as sometimes we can use each other to help out and give each other resources. And hey, have you ever done one of these before? Have you ever worked with one of those? And kind of help each other out. So there's a real strong sense of we're all in this together, so to speak. And they can come out from behind the table or sit back behind the table, whichever one they feel most comfortable with. Well, the professional community that I'm involved in is primarily the community of vocational rehabilitation. I'm involved in a number of professional organizations like the Texas Association of Rehab Professionals in the Private Sector. I'm involved in a number of different community groups, steering committees that put together job fairs for the disabled, and the Dallas Area Rehabilitation Association, those types of communities. There is a community here at Baylor also that I'm involved in. Other department directors, kind of my peers, if you will, at work, that we have a pretty strong sense of community also.
Well, right now we're probably most in need of people to do resume writing. Are you comfortable doing that? Absolutely.
The amount of time that I spend or that I live in this community is anywhere between 40 and 50 hours a week if you consider all the work related activities that I have here at Baylor or other types of communities that I'm involved with, are pretty much a full-time work week schedule. The disadvantages of being in any professional community that I've ever been involved in is committees. It seems like there's always a task force or a project or something, and while the end result is wonderful and you feel real good about it, there's always that endless meetings and phone calls and the time constraints that puts on you in terms of really being able to get the project done. And anytime you form a committee, it just involves a lot of time. So I'd say that's the disadvantage. The benefits of being involved in a professional community really are the support that you can get from your peers and your coworkers and other people who've been through the same kinds of issues that you have. Many times in human services, professionals can get kind of burned out. There's a lot involved in giving to your clients and being there for them. It's nice to have somebody who's been there too, and somebody who can support you and say, yeah, that was a good job, or I know that that's a tough one for you. So a lot of it really is kind of encouragement, emotional support, as well as resources.
If you think about Giddings for a moment, Giddings is held together by what Durkheim called mechanical solidarity. Mechanical in the sense that everybody's alike. They have the same values and the same lifestyle. So it's easy to see how Giddings works, where the social integration comes from. But now let's think for a moment about New York City. In New York City, you have all different kinds of values and lifestyles. You have millionaires and people on welfare. You have prostitutes and priests, blacks and whites, and all kinds of different ideas and people. What holds it together? Where does the integration come from? Well, Durkheim says it's organic. It's organic in the sense that everybody depends on everyone else, that no one is self-sufficient in New York City. But Durkheim also says that while that works for the city, it doesn't work for the individual citizen in New York, that they need more. In fact, Durkheim's famous work on suicide was trying to explain how organic solidarity by itself isn't good for the individual, that it doesn't provide enough individual integration. And so Durkheim argues that you need these non-territorial communities, voluntary organizations, workplace identification, in order to have that feeling of belonging. The degree to which territorial and non-territorial communities differ is a very difficult question. Some sociologists say that basically there is no difference, that non-territorial communities can meet all of the needs of territorial communities, and we need not worry about the passing away of places like Giddings, that is no problem. Other sociologists argue that the fact that territorial communities have a place to organize around, to identify with, give them special psychological advantages that non-territorial communities can never meet. I tend to agree with them. I think territorial communities are unique and special in that way. One other major difference: non-territorial communities typically work best among the middle class and the upper class. Territorial communities, on the other hand, often are found among the working class people. Professional workers are more likely to identify with their work group. Middle-class people are more likely to go to church or join the Rotary Club. So non-territorial communities tend to be a middle to upper class phenomenon.
Modern life exerts a centrifugal force on humankind. It pulls many of us away from the secure, intimate relations of the old territorial community. There are sociologists who doubt that the community was really as stable as some believe. Nevertheless, Nevertheless, there is no argument that for generations, small-town communities did provide emotional, physical, and economic nourishment of people. When they leave those communities for opportunities in great cities, some try to recreate the life they left. They form suburbs, often homogeneous communities, half hamlet, half big city. Those who actually move into the city also feel the need to form communities. There are urban neighborhoods, but many communities not based on territory or geography. The people in the city are too varied, their backgrounds too different, their values and interests too disparate. Still, they form communities, not necessarily with their neighborhood, but with people miles away. They form communities with their fellow workers, with those who have similar interests or hobbies. There is a physical law that forces molecules to congregate in a certain way regardless of circumstances. There also seems to be an equally strong social force. It brings human beings, regardless of circumstance or location, to form some sort of community. It seems necessary for human happiness and survival.
Historically, if you go back far enough, in American history, communities provided all of our needs. Communities were self-sufficient. More recently, as we've become interdependent from the Industrial Revolution on, the community provides really only psychological needs. They provide a sense of belonging, a place where people care about you as a whole person.
You really do know everybody. And you like the idea of going down the street and somebody waving at you. Everybody knows everybody. The worst part about that is everybody also knows everything you're doing.
I like the small churches. Everybody knows everybody in the church. I think that's nice about the small community.
There's no reason to believe that people in modern American cities are any less caring or any less socially connected with one another.
Most residents of DeSoto, including myself, have a lot of pride in our city. We try to do everything that we can to make it a better city.
Well, it's quite clear that when the American suburb was being developed, it was sold and bought by the American public as a way to combine city and country.
Non-territorial communities, feelings of belonging, Gemeinschaft that exist without a place, have developed, in a sense, to provide exactly the same functions that the territorial communities provided. A sense of belonging, a place where people know you, and a place where people care about you.
The benefits of being involved in a professional community really are the support that you can get from your peers and your coworkers and other people who've been through the same kinds of issues that you have. The disadvantages of being in any professional community that I've ever been involved in is committees.
The degree to which territorial and non-territorial communities differ is a very difficult question. Some sociologists say that basically there is no difference.